Welcome everyone to the sixth round post-fight show with me, Zane Simon, here for UFC Norfolk. UFC's latest card in Norfolk, Virginia, Poirier versus Pettis. Fun, but also equally just really weird night for the UFC. Lots of strange decisions, lots of refereeing and judging weirdness, and all sorts of stuff up and down the card, fight weirdness, beginning to end, some production glitches. Just a strange night for the UFC. Some fun fights too. Poirier versus Pettis, obviously, still totally amped from that fight. Just for those 2 rounds, that was an amazing, amazing fight. I did not necessarily think that Dustin Poirier, if he got Pettis down, could hang with Pettis on the ground without being submitted. Pettis obviously was throwing up a lot of triangles, reversed Poirier several times. But man, when Poirier got him cut up and everything just became this bloodbath in there, that made everything really difficult for Pettis' submission game. Poirier, the standing, Poirier definitely was the busier fighter standing. Pettis got some nice strikes in, but it was a lot of Pettis' same problems, classic problems are still there of just getting backed straight into the cage and then not having an answer for defending himself against the cage or keeping himself from getting hit when he gets against the cage. But that really wasn't the story of this fight. It was really just about this insane grappling battle that it turned into. And then eventually Anthony Pettis getting injured and his body failing him in a weird, just totally unanticipated way. Kind of like him breaking a hand in the Max Holloway fight. It just seems like Pettis is, his days of being an all-action war fighter from his WEC days have left him a weirdly fragile fighter now in his UFC career, and it's coming up in ways that are hard to predict. And even if he hadn't gotten injured in this Poirier fight, it's hard to say that he would have turned it around. He was getting pretty badly cut up, a lot of blood going into his eyes, and it was getting to the point that his grappling wasn't accounting for enough, and Poirier was able to drive in on takedowns continually. So it was already going against him, but a crazy good fight that had a ton of momentum swings and was so much fun to watch, with a kind of disappointing shortened ending on the top of a kind of disappointing but kind of fun card. It's really hard to kind of wrap your head around it. Right before that, in the co-main event, you got Matt Brown taking on Diego Sanchez, and Brown looking good, doing work, eating that one liver kick that Matt Brown has to eat in every fight that causes him to immediately double over in pain and look like he's gonna crap himself and totally fall to pieces. And then Diego Sanchez just not being nearly the durable fighter that he used to be. And I realize he got caught with a hellacious elbow in there, so it's not one of those things where you can just, it's not one of those things where you can say like, oh, he never would have been KO'd by that strike 5 years ago. But 5 years ago, Diego Sanchez was one of the most remarkably unbreakable fighters in the history of MMA. He was just impossible to hurt, and now he's a fighter that gets switched off when he starts getting hurt, And this is another first round KO loss for him. Afterward, Brown sounded like he's still reasonably about as willing to commit to retirement as any fighter ever is. So, that probably means we'll be seeing Matt Brown in 3 months, or next year we'll see him back for some random fight. But in the meantime, if this really was the end for Matt Brown, it's been a really fun constantly entertaining career. You know, a guy who he got to a title eliminator with Robbie Lawler off the back of 7 straight wins over 2012 to 2014. Didn't win that eliminator, but it was a great fight. And even since then, all of his fights have been really, really damned fun. He had that great win over Tim Means, and then, you know, it was that back kick or that kick stoppage to Jake Ellenberger and that war with Donald Cerrone. And so I can't hate on Matt Brown for the career he's had, win or lose. He's always been a fun fighter to watch. And I can't tell him to retire. That's not necessarily my place at all, but I hope he finds other stuff to do. Hope he kind of rides off, can spend time with his kids, get another business going, coach, whatever else might be out there for him away from fighting, because this sport is not kind to people who linger, and most of them do. So great win for Matt Brown, but equally rough way to watch Diego Sanchez lose again. For that, Andre Arlovski beat Junior Albini. And Andre Arlovski is such a weirdly frustrating fighter to watch, in that he has a bad chin. A lot of people expected him to lose. I expected him to lose this fight purely based on him having a bad chin, because he's otherwise a technically better fighter than Junior Albini everywhere. Better wrestler, better grappler, better striker. But the thing with Andre Arlovski is he has literally always had this bad chin. You know, this is a dude who way back in 2001 was getting knocked out by Rico Rodriguez and Pedro Hizzo in the UFC back to back, who always been a dude who looks amazing up until his chin fails him. And when his chin doesn't fail him, he almost always wins. So Albini, for him, he fought a veteran who's a lot more technically savvy than him, but he's also a 26-year-old heavyweight who just does not have that much high-level pro experience, and it showed in this fight. His striking game is more diverse than, it's reasonably diverse, but it's not necessarily that technically deep. He got pretty lost against Arlovski's striking in this fight, and just kind of resorted to trying to clinch or trying to wade in behind the same couple of combinations, which Arlovski had timed. And Arlovski was able to just kind of outpoint him, keeping his chin safe. Late in the fight, Albini swarmed a bit and threw a bunch of heavy hooks and didn't land many of them, but looked like he cracked Arlovski a couple of times, but he just could not do that enough to turn the fight around. And, of course, the bad side of that being that Arlovski is now still going to be, he's in that sort of weird Mark Hunt sort of area at the top of the heavyweight division, where you've got these guys who are obviously have lost a step. They're no longer the fighter they used to be, or the Alistair Overeem position, but they're still a step above all the guys who are trying to rise up the ranks below them. And for Arlovski, this is off the back of 5 straight losses, and this is a solid win, but it means we now have to find, the UFC has to find more top heavyweight matchups for him, and kind of retread all of these waters he's still been right through again. And it's too bad for a heavyweight division badly in need of new blood among the elite that Albini was not up for the task there. So there are still a few fights in the heavyweight division that Arlovski hasn't had yet, but definitely fans are going to lose out more on all the new matchups that would have been possible with an Albini win. Kind of. For that, Cesar Ferreira took a win over Nate Marquardt. Not the most thrilling fight, just kind of Marquardt. He actually did look like he came out to push the pace a little better in this fight, and he especially in round 2, he put it on Ferreira. He probably won that round. He pushed the pace. He landed some good shots. But then in round 3, he just gave up too much control, let Ferreira take over, win the round, and Ferreira took a split decision win and then called out Paulo Costa after he won that fight. And there are a lot of people out there who are saying, like, Paulo Costa is going to absolutely destroy Cesar Ferreira, and maybe he will. But there are a couple things. First, how many guys in the middleweight division are going to call out Paulo Costa right now? And if somebody does, the UFC kind of has to make that fight. Like, after beating Johnny Hendrix, for Costa, like, Hendrix is a good name win, but he's not an elite middleweight talent at this point. So finding the right matchup for him in that division is just kind of weird. There aren't that many mid-level middleweights that are not immediately in like the top 10 or aren't coming or aren't just like coming off a random loss, treading water in the middle of that division. So Ferreira getting this win and calling out Costa, like, there's not really many better fights for the UFC to book right now for Costa than a guy who wants to fight him, who is winning fights in the middleweight division. So I would not be at all surprised if that fight gets made. Also got to be noted, dipping back quickly to that Albini Arlovski fight, I realized that Reebok is in a pinch, is in a bit of a bind in the, like, you know, fighters get there during fight week, and then the UFC Reebok has to like tailor trunks to them for that fight for that week, let them choose their style and their color and all that. But they got to figure something better out for Junior Albini, because even rocking the baby nickname, you cannot be looking like that much of a large, oversized Cabbage Patch baby in the UFC. There was a full-on diaper in there. Even the commentary booth called it. Everybody, you know, it's just a weird distraction in a night of weird distractions. Probably one of the brightest single performance spots of the night came with Rafael Sanzal's victory over Matt Lopez. Lopez definitely thrown in over his head in that fight. A good, aggressive wrestle grappler who has not tuned his striking that well yet against one of the better defensive wrestlers and strikers in that division. And Assunção just used that to absolutely, his defensive ability to batter Lopez's lead leg, to outland him in striking exchanges and boxing exchanges all fight. And then finally, when Lopez's leg could not support him anymore, hit him with a right hook late in the fight to turn his lights out. One of the most complete, dominating performances of Assunção's career. The kind of statement win he needed over a guy that he probably shouldn't have even been fighting at all, if he wants to get, you know, back into title contention, if he wants another one of those top 3 or 4 guys that can elevate him to the belt. Because Assunção is obviously, he's just been a hair's breadth from title contention for years now as the dude that can beat almost all of the bantamweights in the world, but has none of the personality that the UFC is interested in pushing for a title shot. Somebody who will sell nothing for them, and so doesn't get anything, just continually cycles through other top guys at 135 below title, just out of title contention. Hopefully getting a big KO win like this helps propel him a little more. I know Marlon Moraes made the smart call out earlier in the card that I'll get to, where he called out Jimmy Rivera now that Dominic Cruz is injured. So, you know, guys are figuring out ways to fast track things. I'm not sure where that's going to leave Assunção. But guys like Lineker and Garbrandt are out there looking for fights in the near future, I'm sure. So I'm not sure. Hopefully this exciting performance will get him another chance to test himself against one of the real top title contenders in this division and see if he can maybe take that final step to the belt. For Lopez, it's unfortunate for him, but it's kind of the UFC's been doing this with a few guys at 135 where it just seems like they don't really know, they're like, this guy's aggressive, he wants fights, he's exciting, he's a good athlete, we're just gonna push him in as deep a water as we can, as quick as we can. Like, now you have like Luke Sanders, who fought Yuri Alcantara and is now fighting Brian Caraway. He's like an unranked dude, 10 fighters in that division. Lopez is kind of finding himself in the same boat here, where it's a hard loss and not a fight he was ready for, but he's still an exciting talent. He's still a good athlete, still a good wrestler, still a good grappler. Just needs a lot of work on his striking to get himself up to the level where these kind of fights make sense for him. For that, opening up the main card, Clay Guida beat Joe Lausanne. And I know Connor and I had talked about this fight before on the Vivisection as a two true outcome fight. Clay Guida either takes a decision win or Joe Lausanne submits him early. Clay Guida getting his first knockout win since 2008. No, that can't be. Yeah. First knockout win since 2008 over Sammy Schiavo. I don't think he's mind at all. Great win for Guida, but also, man, Joe Lausanne just does not look like he is ready to be in high-level fights in the lightweight division anymore. His reactions are not great. He was just shelling and waiting while Guida is throwing heat at him, and a dude known for throwing heat at people. So for Lausanne to just get absolutely brutalized in a minute and even take what felt like way too much damage to a lot of people in 1 minute of a fight, that is not a good look for J-Lo. And that's tough, because even he didn't get knocked out in his Stevie Ray fight, but that was another brutal, hard loss too. And it sucks to see Lausanne getting really hurt like that. So I don't know. Hopefully he doesn't come back too quickly and take another fight real soon after that. Looking like he's really wearing these fights at this point in his career. Before that, closing out the prelims, Marlon Mariah, John Dodson, real mess of a fight. Dodson, he's had for years, being the smaller, shorter fighter than practically anyone in the UFC. He has that real leap in style where he likes to find his angles from range and then leap in behind left hands, throwing short power shots, and it really set him up to get fouled a lot. So he leapt into a low kick straight to the balls from Marlon Mariah that had him throwing up in the cage, which that was not pretty at all. And then got eye poked shortly afterward, jumping in again, and then jumped in again and got head butted. And yeah, some of that's on Marlon Mariah, having his hands out there, throwing his low kicks on a guy moving into him. But you can't really blame Mariah for standing his ground, and John Dodson for jumping in on him and them clashing heads. So fight ended up being kind of a weird mess for that. At one point late in the fight, Mariah was in on a single leg, and the ref started warning him and broke them up for no reason at all. And then Dodson got a takedown, and Mariah jumped on a guillotine, and Dodson, at the bell, Dodson tapped out. And I know there were a lot of people who say that Dodson was just tapping because Marlon Mariah wasn't letting go of the choke, and he wanted to get him off after the bell had rung and after the ref had said, okay, break. But it was as the horn was sounding, I'm sure that Dodson will say that he was just tapping to get Marlon Mariah off of him. I'm sure that maybe that's even what was happening. But part of me wants to say that it would impact round scoring. Judges are going to see that. They're going to see a dude who is even at the horn kind of might be giving up in the round. and maybe scored against him. But frankly, it wouldn't have mattered at all because the scores for this fight were just all over the place. I had it scored 29-28 for Dodson. Could easily have seen it go 29-28 for Mariah, especially given that tight sub he had at the end of the third round. And, I think that tight submissions should score well. But to have it 30-27 Mariah, 30-27 Dodson, and 30-27 Mariah just felt absolutely absurd. It was weird that two judges didn't give Dodson the first round where he dropped Mariah and then got fouled hard twice. I really felt like that made no sense. It just was a weird mess of a fight afterward. Like I say, though, it's good for Mariah because he came into the UFC as a hot property as an action fighter, and it felt like going through John Dodson and Rafael Asunciao for his first two fights, like he got thrown two difficult, not thrilling opponents, guys that it's really, really hard to look good against. So even if he maybe didn't deserve the win, or even if it was quite bad judging or fouling and all that, getting a win here is great for Marlon Mariah because it did put him in position to make that call out at Jamie Rivera. And he might get that fight just for the excitement factor that he would bring to it. So a big win for Marlon Mariah and a good win for fans who want to see more of him in bigger action fights. I can't feel really terrible about it, even if it's not something that I want to see. Like, even if it's not something I think was done, like refereed properly, adjudicated properly, even if I feel like Mariah got away with way more fouls than he should have, even if I think that the ref was just trash in that fight, I'm happy to see Marlon Mariah win it. So be that what it may, maybe I'm being a bit hypocritical or something, but I'm always happy to see Marlon Mariah be set up for bigger and more fun action fights down the road. Before that, Tatiana Suarez put an absolute wrestling clinic on Viviane Pereira. Pereira really needs to figure out her takedown defense. I mean, I know a lot of strawweights are not great at takedowns. There are not many women in that division that wrestle anything like Suarez, but Pereira jumping on guillotines every single time Suarez went for her legs. She basically just acquiesced to every takedown in that fight and made sure that she spent the whole fight on her back getting beat up. So Pereira has to figure that out. Like, hopefully her coaches can just train her out of that, because it's good for regional single level takedown defense where, like, maybe on the Brazilian regional scene, people are just going to be shooting sloppy single legs, and you jumping on a guillotine is going to immediately scare them off of it or get you a great sub. But at this level where even a few fighters can chain their takedown attempts, can change angles, can change from single to double or to body lock to trip. If you're just jumping on a guillotine every time, you are guaranteeing that every time you face a person like that, they will just run a takedown clinic on you. So great win for Suarez, who continues to assert herself as one of the better prospects in that division just off of her wrestling game. She's still kind of in that Matthew Lopez division, or in that Matthew Lopez situation, as a great wrestle grappler with some barely functional striking, but she's in that situation in a division where a lot less fighters wrestle really well offensively or defensively. So there's a lot more room for her to cut through to the top of the division there. I'm not sure what she'll end up facing next. Let's see. Take a look at the list here really quick, where this win gets her. Oh, and I have to remember who's coming off other wins here. So either way, maybe somebody like Alexandra Albu would be a fun next fight, since Albu is just kind of a sloppy, high power fighter who also does not necessarily defend takedowns that well, but has a lot of muscle. Be another fun, exciting fight to get Suarez some more cage time. or potentially somebody like Danielle Taylor, who has shown, a lot of power, but not necessarily the volume to scare Suarez off from getting in on her hips, but is a much better takedown defender with her judo background and could force Suarez into a more difficult fight. So this is a good win for Suarez and a tough loss that Pareja is going to have to learn from. For that, Sage Northcutt got a very strong, uneventful win over Michel Quinones. I gotta blame Connor Rebish for making me pick Quinones in this, because it really did look to me beforehand like Sage Northcutt fighting a less athletic guy that fights like Sage Northcutt does, and that's exactly how this fight played out. I was willing to pick against Northcutt just because he's handled adversity so poorly in the past. When he gets hurt, when he gets put on his back, things like that, he panics. Truth is, he didn't even face any adversity in this fight. Quinones fought almost the entire bout like he had no clue how to handle Northcutt's speed and power. And when your whole game is to be the faster, more powerful fighter in the cage, it's not that surprising when you just kind of shut down to somebody who is faster and more powerful than you. So it was a pretty easy 3-round decision for Sage Northcutt. Something to get got a lot of fans back on the hype train a little, which is good, and is maybe a good blueprint for the UFC down the road to stop putting Northcutt in against really solid grapplers, even if they're much less athletic than him, because a lot of those dudes have, even Inodi Pfister and Enrique Marin, Northcutt has looked like a dude. They've been less glowing of Northcutt's skill than a win like this, where he just gets to look pretty and move around. And this is much more like the Francisco Trevino fight, where that was just a much less athletic guy who only wanted to strike with him. But something the UFC might want to look at if they actually want to keep Sage Northcutt as one of their more marketable faces in the promotion, not putting him in against every mediocre, scrappy grappler who can take his punches and will just turn the fight into a mess for him. Alpha male will have totally fixed that, and he can handle it every time out from here on out. And we'll see Sage Northcutt as the fighter that Dana White envisioned him as when he got him all hot and bothered on looking for a fight a couple of years ago. For that, Nina Answeroff beat Angela Hill, and it really kind of exposed some of the problems that I was worried that she might against Hill in this fight, which is mostly that Hill has kind of become this low-power fighter who needs to fight at a pace and volume that her style doesn't easily sustain. Like, her active footwork involves so much wasted energy, and it seems to just wear her out over fights, where she started this fight pretty well, trading shots, picking angles, picking Answeroff off. And then as Answeroff started to get her timing down and to land her own shots, Hill started to get, she kept moving all right, but when she actually wanted to throw, she had to get flat-footed. And the moment she got flat-footed, Answeroff just hit her with power, landed the better shots over the last 2 rounds, and especially in the last round, just kind of tuned Hill up. And it seems like Hill's caught between this point where she wants to be this power striker who sits down on shots, but can't necessarily trust her game to carry herself through that, or this really active, high footwork, low power volume striker who gets tired running that style. And Answeroff is just she's got good power. She fights at a high pace, and she loves to sit in the pocket and brawl. And over the course of 3 rounds, Hill could not stop from giving her that fight. So good win from Answeroff. She's now strung a couple together now, being much less the wild fighter that just kind of threw away fights, getting herself taken down and getting herself picked off when she fought Juliana Lima and Justine Kish, looking more like somebody who can compete with more of the top 10 of that division. So I'm interested to see what the UFC pushes her in after that. Moving down the card now to the Fight Pass prelims, Sean Strickland, Court Magee. Pretty uneventful fight. Strickland picking Magee off with jabs a lot early. Magee turning things around in round 2, just being busier, throwing more volume, throwing to the body, picking off Strickland's legs. And then late in the fight, Magee I think actually what it really turned on late is Magee early in round 3 jumped in to try and close the distance on Strickland for a takedown, and Magee wasn't getting any takedowns that fight. Ate a solid right hand at the temple as he did so, and Strickland was able to dump Magee on his back, land some good ground and pound. Magee eventually got up, but pulled guard for an ankle lock and then scrambled and just kind of ended up giving up the third round to Strickland's top control. And not a great fight for Strickland, who still looks like he, for a guy that has a really pretty jab and can throw a right hand when he really wants to, 95% of his offense is just a jab with nothing else behind it. And busy fighters who work around that and who are willing to be more creative and be more aggressive and pressure him are going to cause him problems. Magee seemed like, coming from the Santiago Ponzinibbio and Kamaru Usman losses, Magee seemed like the easiest version of that same stylistic matchup. And Strickland still struggled with it a lot. So it tells you that Strickland, when he faces another pressure fighter who's not afraid to move in on him, who's not afraid to throw power and to pick multiple targets and to wrestle with him and to push him against the cage and grind him, he's always going to have trouble handling that because he is way too reliant on a jab that is nice. It's a good jab, but without power behind it, people stop respecting it after a while. For that, in round 2, in the second Fight Pass fight of the night, Jake Collier beat Marcel Fortuna. Easily the best win and best that Collier has looked in his career. He was able to stay really active while eating shots from Fortuna and not looking chinny. In the past, Collier's looked like a fighter who can be broken a bit by harder punchers. He's looked like a fighter who gasses a little for the pace that he keeps. Maybe isn't as athletic as the way he wants to fight. But he didn't look in shape, but he looked tireless in this fight and just totally outworked Fortuna without getting hurt. And, this is a little bit of a wake-up call for Fortuna after that big Hamilton win. It wasn't that surprising when he couldn't get by Jordan Johnson, just because he's a supremely good wrestler, but Fortuna as a low-volume power striker just doesn't have that deep of a game. And for a guy who's got a great BJJ pedigree, he rarely seems to be able to hold positions and hold advantageous grappling positions on the mat. So, he got mount on Collier at one point in this fight, and Collier was able to immediately roll out of it and get back to his feet. He had Collier's back a couple times and slid right off it, and just his inability to lock down those positions where he should be a dominant grappler means that he's really reliant on his ability to catch people with single big shots as a striker. And if he's not, then dudes are going to outwork him. You can't be just a low volume power striker. Even in a division as shallow as light heavyweight, there are guys like Collier out there who they don't have to be that good to beat you. So even with a pretty sloppy fight, Collier came out with a very badly needed career win for him. And the opening fight, Carl Roberson beat Darren Stewart shockingly by rear naked choke. I don't think anybody thought that Roberson would submit Stewart. But it's a testament to Stewart continuing to be a really way overly aggressive fighter everywhere who just does not pay any attention to his opponent's ability to hurt him. to his credit, he actually did not come out with a lot of that game plan early. He was very mindful of Roberson striking, but that also meant that he didn't get any of his own wrestling going. And by the time he did, Roberson had his timing absolutely cued in on. Threw him when Stewart went for a body lock, and then in the scramble got Stewart's back just because Stewart is so wild and unstructured and unmindful of his own defense, and without even getting hooks in initially, sunk in the rear naked choke, got the hooks, finished it. Good win for Roberson, who, if nothing else, looks like he has really good instincts and is violent as hell. So a great way to start out his UFC career coming off of that Tuesday Night Contenders series. Excited to see more of him at that point, even if it was a pretty wild and weird win from him. It was a good, fun, violent finish that makes you excited to see him face more guys in that division. Like I said, just kind of a weird night. A lot of underdogs won. Collier winning, Answeroff winning. I think Mariah, that may have actually been a pretty even fight there in the odds. Arlovski winning, obviously. And a lot of weirdness from the commission, from the refs, from the scorecards, all that stuff. But I can't hate those 2 rounds we got out of Poirier versus Pettis. That was fantastic. And hopefully Brown rides out on a massive KO win. It'd be nice if Diego Sanchez looked at his other career options off a KO loss. But once again, like I say, I can't tell anybody to retire. So I'm not going to say Diego has to hang him up. It's getting really painful to watch him get flatlined for a dude who used to be as tough as he was. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find me over at bloodyelbow.com, writing, videos, editing, all that stuff that I do over there. And obviously here on MMANation.com, DOTCOM, our YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up down below. That helps us a ton. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We will be back next week where I will probably have a co-host once again I'm forgetting what event is next. That for UFC Fight Night, Verdum versus Tybura in Sydney, Australia, which looks like a pretty remarkably uninspiring event at the moment. But I'll be there for it, so if you'll be here, then you'll get a lot more of me. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.